Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome to today's conversation about uniting together to protect Dharma and how we can achieve that. In the recent crises that we've been witnessing in Bangladesh and beyond, the persecution of Hindus, we've just, I feel it's very important to have dialogue, have communication, because no one else is going to do it for us. Living in the UK, there's been zero coverage, absolute zero coverage of these atrocities by the BBC and other news channels. So when asked recently what I thought was a good solution on how to overcome these kind of situations, the only thing I could think of is that we need to be more united. Hindus need to be more united so that our voice can be heard and it can be taken seriously, because clearly it's not being taken seriously. When Pakistan won the cricket match the other day, and then they celebrated in India with firecrackers, and it was kind of illegal. They got arrested, and that made the BBC news. That we heard about here in England. But when Hindus are dying in Bangladesh, that's not being reported by the BBC. So why are we, you might think, why is Kishori harping on about this topic so much? But because it feels like, A, we are not being taken seriously. And two, we actually don't take ourselves seriously. So there's not enough unity amongst Hindus. And I feel like it stems from a lacking of faith and a lacking of the concept of what is Dharma and why should we protect it? Instead of just, and then there's obviously the extremism, even in our case, when we get pushed like this, we also tend to become fanatic, and then we want to pick up our guns and swords, and then we also want to shout and scream and use abusive language online. But is that going to be a solution? Does that help? So today, to discuss all of this, discuss Dharma, discuss what is a true Kshatriya, what should we do in these situations, what does it mean to have a secular India, how can we, as Hindus, how can we unite? How can we become stronger in our faith? How can we not become hurtful and resentful? Because we don't want to become that thing that we are so, against. We're trying to avoid that. We were trying to avoid fundamentalism and fanaticism. So today, I'm really, really grateful to have such a great speaker, very special guest. He's a monk. He's a brahmachari, a long-standing brahmachari in ISKCON. He's a prolific spiritual author, authored more than 25 books. He's spoken all over the world about Dharma, about this Vedic wisdom. I listen to his podcast regularly on YouTube. It's called the Monk's Podcast, and he has written over 4,000 Gita daily meditations, which you can go through on gitadaily.com. So, I mean, he doesn't need any further introduction. If you're interested in wisdom, he's definitely someone you should look out for. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming His Grace Chaitanya Charan Das. Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna, Dandavat. Thank you for the
so
invitation.
Nice to have you.
I've also seen many of your shows, and I also seen several of your shows, and you very candidly address
Krishna.
Contemporary issues. And also, I think your kirtan with your family is so beautiful.
Oh,
it shows
Krishna.
the devotion of your heart, the devotion of your community, family. I'm grateful to be here today. Thank you.
Only by the blessings of such Vaishnavas. So thank you so much for joining, Prabhu. We're just so grateful to have you. And I thought maybe we could just start with a brief intro, just to get a connection of why did you become a monk? That's always a shocking life decision for most people to imagine.
Yeah, there are multiple factors, but I would say the main factor was that I felt this was the best way I could contribute to society. Since my childhood, I had a lot of faith in the power of education. So I felt that through knowledge, I can change myself and I can change others. And I was interested not just in theoretical knowledge, but more in applied knowledge. And that's why I chose engineering rather than science. And when I was studying in one of the top engineering colleges in India, at that time, I was also part of a social service organization where I they were having various things, but I was interested in education. So I used to go to the slums and offer free tuitions for the kids over there. And I found that as they became friends with the kids, we realized that they started speaking their hearts, and they were from dysfunctional families, mostly because of alcoholic fathers and domestic violence. So I started thinking, really, what can knowledge of, say, geography or history or math help them in such situations? So I felt that we need to do something more. So we started getting into, got some specialists to come and speak over there. We helped so many of the people over there get off alcohol. But then there was a local municipal election, and one of the candidates, in order to woo the voters, brought 2 truckloads of liquor and offered it free. Now, so not only the fathers, but even the kids started drinking.
Oh,
And that's
Krishna.
when it struck me that education may open doors externally, but there's something, open doors to a better life externally, but there's something inside us which prevents us from walking through those doors. So that was something inside us. So that's what actually made me start exploring the inner world more. And then a friend gave me the Bhagavad-Gita, and I read in 336 that Athakena prayuktoyam papam charati purusha anichchanapi varshne baladi vaniyojita. What is it that makes one act against one's own interests, even when one knows that one is acting like that? So I felt, yeah, this is such a relevant question. It was not just that I had seen in those people's lives, I had seen it around me. Even in one of the top colleges, there were students who were getting into drugs. One of the toppers of our university was a chain smoker, and he at that time got the highest paying job in the history of our college. But in 6 months, he got lung cancer, and within a year, he died. So I realized that material education itself, doesn't really remove this inner demon, whatever it is, from inside us. And it's not just out there. I was also known infamous for being quite short tempered at that time. So I also felt that I'm sabotaging myself. So when I started studying the Bhagavad Gita, and then I started practicing the principles of Bhakti, I started especially chanting the holy names and fixing the mind on Krishna. I found myself getting transformed. One of my friends was brought up in a good family but was sliding into alcoholism. He also started practicing Bhakti, and he also became transformed. So I felt this is empowering. So then I had opportunities to go to America for studying. I had a maternal uncle who had his own company. He wanted me to come there and possibly become his successor. And I also got some good jobs in good MNCs in India. I decided to stay for some time, later go to America. So while I was working, I was also sharing the wisdom of the Gita with others. So just informally giving talks in hostel rooms and with students, small groups. So one evening I had a program, a Bhagavad-Gita talk, and I was working, and my boss, I was a software engineer. My boss told me, today we have an urgent deadline. You'll have to stay on and work. I said, no, I have to go. Can we adjust? I'll do it later. He said, no, you have to work. So then I tried to get some other friends to, if they could go for the talk, but there hardly anyone who was there and who could go. Then that I stayed on that evening. But then when I was coming back, I thought that if I was not doing the software job, there would be, it's an important job. It's a important, India has made a mark in it. I'm not minimizing software engineering, but what I felt was, if I was not doing this, there would be 100 other people who would take up this job. But if I'm not teaching the Bhagavad Gita, how many people are there to do that? So I felt that studying and sharing this wisdom could be a greater contribution. So, and especially greater in the sense that not many people were doing that. So for me, the Bhagavad Gita is not so much a religious book as a book for personal transformation. And I'm still on that journey, but writing than the Gita, studying the Gita, sharing the Gita, I feel it can make us all better human beings. So one of my websites is the spiritual scientist. So I often say that science can make the outer world better, spirituality can make the inner world better, and we need
Wow.
both. So that's in brief.
Absolutely. That's wow. That is a wonderful, in-depth view as to why we would actually take this seriously. It's very, very inspiring because many people would have chosen, money. Money is the honey. The spiritual transformation is nice so long as it doesn't impinge on my material enjoyment. That's usually the imbalance. So, and I find that that might be the crux of where this this idea of dharma comes in. How can we choose dharma over our own lower needs, lower consciousness over ourselves? So if we could maybe just dive straight in from there. What is dharma to begin with? Why do we need it?
Okay. So now the word dharma is famously multivalent. It has many different meanings. So the commonly known meanings are dharma is religion. Like we have Hindu dharma, we have various Christian dharma. That is one way in which the word is used, which is also one valid usage, but that is not the only usage. Another word of meaning of dharma is duty, that this is my dharma. So parents take care of the children. When children grow up, they have their dharma to take care of their parents. Like that, that could be a dharma. Dharma can refer to duty. In the Bhagavad-Gita, when Krishna asks, Pruchhami tvam dharma sammudha cheta, I want to know what is my dharma, I am bewildered. He is basically asking what is the right thing to do. So you could say dharma can also be translated as the right thing to do. It could be. Now going deeper, we want to say dharma, if it comes from the root dri means to sustain. So dharma is the activity which sustains us, the activity that enables us to be who we are. So in that sense, we don't really choose dharma over ourselves. It is rather by choosing dharma, we become ourselves. We become the fullest manifestation of who we are by dharma. So dharma is not a set of religious rituals, and it's certainly not a set of don't do this and don't do that and don't do this. So yes, there are some pleasures which we do need to abstain from. But then that is required for any activity in life. If there's an athlete, the athletes, they have to have a strict regimen, they regulate their diet, they do so much discipline so that they can be good athletes. So in any field, to become something worthwhile, there are some things we abstain from. But what dharma is about is that someone sacrifice. So I'll just introduce one concept. So as I said, the word dharma has many meanings. The Bhagavad-Gita talks about three modes. There is sattva, rajas, and tamas. Goodness, passion, and ignorance. So goodness can be associated with clarity, and passion with energy, and ignorance with apathy.
Apathy.
So apathy, I don't care about anything. Apathy, energy, and clarity, broadly speaking.
Right.
So one way to understand these three modes is that you can say some people make things happen, some people watch things happen, and some people wonder what happened. So that's goodness, passion, and ignorance for you.
Right.
So broadly, we could say dharma in this context is what? That where sattva guides and regulates rajas and tamas. Sattva regulates and guides rajas and tamas. So we have clarity and then we direct our energy. And apathy is not always a bad thing, because if we start getting affected by everything that happens around us, we'll be overwhelmed. To some extent, we have to turn off. We have to tune off. For example, sleeping. If we kept being worried about all the things that could go wrong in our life, we'll not be able to sleep. So even the tamoguna is not a bad thing. If there were no tamoguna, we would not be able to sleep. To some extent, when we go to sleep, we are apathetic about what is happening around us. And that is required. But the key is, what is dominating? Is it apathy that is dominating and defining a person? Is it simply energy, or is it clarity? So dharma is that situation when energy and apathy are guided by clarity. Okay, this is what I'm going to focus on, and this is what I'm not going to focus on. So then what this means is dharma is those set of activities that help us, those set of activities that help clarity to become stronger, and then guide energy and apathy accordingly. So this is one
Wow.
more meaning of dharma. Now you could go at a higher level. Dharma culminates in bhakti. So dharma at one level is being who we are. Hmm? But at our core, we are also spiritual beings, and we are parts of the supreme spiritual being. So we could say the paradharma, that the culmination, the summit of dharma, the Srimad Bhagavatam says is bhakti. So it says dharma, and that's the multi-level meaning. And at a operational level, at the level we are discussing today, is that, say, if a person is attacked, a basic right of all living beings is to live, to survive, and to practice what they believe. So if that is not being allowed, that is also dharma being violated. So in one sense, dharma is a very universal concept. It is not a sectarian concept at all. It talks about
Right.
our essential nature and how we can live in harmony with that.
Wow. Wonderful. So I really like your vision of dharma being clarity, what you're sharing. So with that in mind, clarity is something that I think is possibly at the heart of what we're lacking as a community. Uh, how should we move forward? Because it seems on one hand we're getting very angry. We have a lot of anger. We've a lot of hurt within us. How do we not transform that back? How do we not reflect that back on others? How do we not become violent and hurtful in response? Because on the one hand, sure, we've got dharma rakshati rakshitaha, right? So dharma protects those who protect dharma. So we have a duty. We have a duty as such that we must protect dharma. But how to gain that clarity that you speak of how to move forward?
Okay. Yeah. Yes. Now, when we talk about clarity, it is important that we understand that every person is an individual. So while at one level, all of us are human beings, and we could say as human beings, there are some fundamental things which we all need and share. And beyond that, each one of us is an individual. So there are some generic duties, generic expectations, generic things which we do, and there are some specific individual things. So in this specific context, if we consider, in the tradition, in the Vedic tradition, there were two primary guides and protectors of society. There are Brahmanas and Kshatriyas. So we could say, broadly speaking, the Brahmanas focus more on clarity and less on energy. Not that the Brahmanas lack energy, but their focus is on gaining inner clarity and sharing that inner clarity with others. So Brahmanas, they have, you could say, spiritual power or inner power. And Kshatriyas, they have more energy than clarity. Then the Rajas is little more than Sattva. So, but their Rajas is balanced by the Brahmanas' guidance. So these two together are considered to be the two key limbs of the body. See, a body needs various parts. If somebody is attacking us, we need eyes to see, okay, where I'm being attacked from, what I'm going to do, why am I being attacked. To make sense of things, we need eyes. So the eyes and the intelligence with which the eyes are associated, that is like the Brahmanas. And the arms are like the Kshatriyas. So the whole body is like a society. So we need both. So Brahmanas what they guide through Shastra, through scriptural knowledge, through wisdom basically. And the Kshatriyas, they guide and protect through Shastra, through weapons. So basically, we need both. We need
We
both.
need both.
So now
That is a
there are
reality. We cannot deny
that's the
that.
reality. Yeah, of course, we do need both. Now, with respect to anger, there are two extremes. See, one is we think of anger as always as bad. That's not true. Anger indicates that we care. And in one sense, if terrible things happen to someone and we don't feel any anger about it, then we see there are different words. There is the word outrage. That's outrageous. What do we mean? That's so objectionable that I'm feeling inflamed by it. So outrage in one sense is good. If we don't feel angry about certain things, then that means we don't care at all. So the emotion of anger itself is not bad. In one sense, you could say no emotions are intrinsically bad. It is only when an emotion takes control of us, that's when it can become bad and put sidelines everything else. So there is, we could say that
Right.
we have three levels of being. There's the body, there's the mind, and there's the soul. So the body broadly we can the mind we can associate with emotions, the body with actions, and the soul is what makes decisions. Soul associate with the
Wow.
intelligence is what makes decisions.
Mhm.
So
Right.
emotions will naturally arise. Now from those emotions there are contemplation, there's a decision that is made, and then the actions come up. So feeling anger at such times, I would say it's not only not wrong, it's actually wrong if we don't feel anger.
Hmm.
However, if we let anger control our actions, then what is happening is that clarity is being sidelined, and then rajas and tamas take control. So we
Hmm.
may do things that hurt others more. We may complicate the problem further. We will make the things worse. So,
Right.
so what does it mean in this context? That yes, there is there is brutality in the world. In the Bhagavad-Gita talks about how all of us have a dark side inside us. We could say there's a part of us that is wise, and there is another part of us that is otherwise. There's the part of us that is
Yeah.
wise and another part that is otherwise. And this
Hmm.
otherwise part can not only be unwise, it can be cruel, it can be evil, it can be brutal. It can degenerate to those levels. Now that is there within everyone. In some
Right.
people, in some people, this part, this asuri part, becomes extremely dominant, and then they can
Hmm.
behave in horrible ways. So generally, just going back to the earlier point of Shastra and Shastra, so what the Brahmanas do is they nourish the wise part within us through wisdom, through culture, through guidance. By the wise part becomes stronger, and that wise part acts like an inner sensor. It's like it's our
Hmm.
conscience, which prevents the
Hmm.
unwise part, the otherwise part, from taking control of us. Hmm?
Hmm.
But not everyone is going to listen to the Brahmanas.
Hmm.
So those who
Yeah.
are going to let their otherwise part, their dark side, control them, those who don't care for wisdom, those who don't care for others, for them the Kshatriyas are essential.
Hmm.
So we could say the Brahmanas, they proffer education, and the Kshatriyas, they offer discipline, they offer correction. That's why they need Shastra. So
Right.
what we need to do is that when somebody's dark side has come out so much that they're not ready to they're not going to listen to any good advice, then Kshatriyas are required to fight. And sometimes that is the only voice that is heard. So but
Right.
the challenge is that if we start thinking that out there is evil, there are dark people, and I'm going to destroy them. Okay, but the problem in doing that is we start thinking, okay, I am destroying the the terrible people out there, and in doing that I can do whatever I like because those people are
Hmm.
terrible.
Hmm.
But then what is happening is, even if I succeed in destroying those terrible people, I am nourishing the otherwise side within me. I am giving free way to the dark side within, the rajas and tamas within me, and
Hmm.
therefore I will may end up becoming the a reflection of what I was sought out to end. So therefore, the Brahmanical side has to guide. So
Hmm.
yes, there are, can talk specifically about what could be done in the situation, but a simple idea is idea of vigilante justice, or just hitting back and destroying those people. Those people may be a particular nationality, a particular religion, a particular demographic group. So what happens is Rajas alone doesn't have clarity. So Rajas
Hmm.
go the mode of passion goes for just blanket solutions. Now, all those people are bad. All those people are terrible,
Hmm.
and we just destroy all of them. So that
Hmm.
clarity, identify the problem and to address it, that is very much required.
Right. So that's really profound. That we obviously both need, two parts of the railway to move progress smoothly ahead. But in ISKCON, we obviously train people to be brahmanas, and I don't really see where in an ideal situation how would we be training the kshatriyas so that they don't become just vigilante, justice warriors
Yes.
or keyboard warriors. So, is there and even in an ideal situation, how would we go about training real kshatriyas? First of all, how would we do that? And what is a real kshatriya? So, what are the qualities? Because obviously, it's described
Okay.
in the Gita that it's not just compassion is a quality of a kshatriya. So, how would we reconcile what is it in your life that would manifest to show you that you are a kshatriya and that you are worthy of picking up arms and using shastra as opposed to shastra, I
Okay.
suppose.
So the Gita states that in 1843, Shauryam Tejo Dhritir Daksham Yuddhe Chapya Palayanam Danam Ishwara Bhavascha Shatram Karma Sabhavajam. So what it is saying is that basically for each one of us, there are multiple aspects to being a Kshatriya. So Shauryam is heroism, valor. Then Tejo is power, energy, power. Then Dhriti is determination. Kshatriyas can persist through great difficulties also. Then Daksham
Mm,
is important, it's expertise or resourcefulness. And then there is
mhm,
Yuddhe Chapya Apalayanam, that one doesn't run away when there is a fight. Apalayanam, not Danam, giving charity. And now Ishwara Bhava, here it doesn't refer to God, it refers to leader. They have the ability to lead
mm,
others, take people along the way.
mhm,
So while I said earlier that Kshatriyas, they use Shastra and Brahmanas Kshatriyas use Shastra and Brahmanas use Shastra, that's a simplified understanding. It's not that
mm.
the warriors or the Kshatriyas are always fighting. That's one aspect. They
No.
have the strength, they have the heroism, they are ready to fight, but they are also resourceful, Daksham. If you consider even in
Mm,
ordinary life, if we consider
mhm,
the police or we consider the military, especially consider the police, they are not always fighting criminals in the sense that they're not always in gunfights or something like that.
mm. Right.
Normal administration is also a part of Kshatriya responsibility. So in
Mhm,
today's world, it's not Kshatriya is not just the the defense or the police. Even administration is a part of Kshatriyas. So the heads of
mhm,
state, they're also meant to be Kshatriyas, especially after the First World War, as weapons started becoming more and more sophisticated. So basically,
right.
political leaders and military leaders started becoming completely separate. If you look at that
Mm,
before Napoleon and others, Napoleon would himself fight. But if you
mm,
consider in Second World War, practically none of the leaders, whether it is of Germany or UK or America, none of them were actually in the military fighting.
mm,
So there has been the separation in today's world between though the politicians and the military. But both are aspects of
right.
Kshatriyas. So that means that
Mhm,
force is sometimes necessary for a solution. But force is not the only way to solve a problem. When
mhm,
Krishna goes as Shanti Dut, then he uses four
mm,
strategies: Sam, Dam,
mm,
Bhed, and Danda. So Sam is likeness, shows similarities. We both share similar interests, and
mm,
it's not in either's interest to fight. So this is
mhm.
also a
Right.
Kshatriya. It is not just like intellectual. Oh, we are all human beings. That's abstract. No, we
Mm,
share practical interests in the world. Sam. Then there is Dam. Dam means that in terms of it is that if you do this is the reward that is there for you. Then
mm,
Bhed. If you don't do this, basically the idea is create dissensions. Create dissensions
mm,
between the in the opposition. If you don't do this, these are the problems that are going to come because you are making a bad decision. Not everyone on your side will also go with you, and there'll be
mm,
division. So actually, then Danda is the last means, that is use weapons. So Kshatriya needs to be resourceful, resourceful to be good at all these things, Sam, Dam, Bhed, and Danda, and use appropriately. So when Krishna went as the peace messenger, first he addressed Dhritarashtra, he addressed Duryodhana, and he said, both the Pandavas and Kauravas are of the same dynasty. And
Right.
they share the same blood, and they both can live prosperously. Why do we need to fight? You can have your kingdom, you can let them have their kingdom. Then when that didn't work, he talked about Dham. He said that, okay, you want a greater kingdom? You keep majority of the kingdom, just give the Pandavas five villages. This is what you can get if you have peace. Then he said, if you don't do this, because of you, Duryodhana, because of his obstinacy, addressing the court, he said that everybody will be killed. Thousands and thousands of people will be killed. And Krishna's speech was so persuasive that temporarily even Dushasan, who was always like Duryodhana's right-hand man, he got affected. And he said, no. He said, if Duryodhana doesn't listen to Krishna, let us all tie him up, arrest him, and hand him over to Krishna. So, of course, that was just a moment of goodness that Dushasan had. Afterwards, again, he submitted to Duryodhana. But that is Bhed. And then there is Danda. So, in today's context, so we could say advocacy and diplomacy are something which is very much required. What you talked earlier about Hindus, broadly speaking, not being united. Because of that, we don't have a voice. Now, you also mentioned that in the media, negative things about us come much more than positive. Or like how we are bad people, then bad things happening to us don't come. But if one person in a billion people does something bad, that will come prominently. Now,
There's
my
definitely
understanding
bias.
is, yeah, that's bias. That's true. But there are two ways of looking at this. See, one is that those people are bad. It is easy to presume malevolence. Malevolence is that those people are bad. But a much more, you could say, reasonable or probable explanation is not malevolence, but ignorance or incompetence. Ignorance or when somebody does something terrible, it could be because they're out to hurt us. Yeah. So in my understanding, here it's incompetence on our parts, because we have never as a Hindus as a group have never thrown around our weight. Now, Hindus are among the wealthiest minorities in the Western world. In America, we are among the wealthiest minorities. I believe in UK also. And so we don't lack in numbers, we don't lack in money, but we lack in cohesion.
Right.
So because of that, what happens is that's incompetence on our parts. Now, I'm not just saying we lack in cohesion in that sense. Often we also don't consider these issues as important till something comes up. So, for example, if you consider Hindus as we want our children to become doctors and engineers, which are individually lucrative fields, but they are not socially influential fields. Jews are a far smaller minority than us, but Jews have consciously focused on entering into fields that mold public opinion. So, if there is no one representing our side, well, did we send somebody from our side to be there or not? So it could be incompetence on our side, and it could be ignorance from their side. So in one sense, you could say that the atrocities against in Bangladesh were not a new event. It has been happening. It would be like a slow genocide that is happening. But right now, at least some news came. Why? Because ISKCON is an international organization, and there was some leverage that ISKCON could put by having demonstrations all over the world. And ISKCON is relatively better connected than many other groups. So we had some contacts with the media. So at least some coverage came. So I would say that, now I'm not saying that the media is not biased, but let's not get into that discussion, or let's not obsess over that without considering our part in it. It could be that we have been incompetent in advocating the importance of Hindu human rights, the advocacy of human Hindu concerns, and it could be that the people over there are just ignorant. So I think presuming ignorance and incompetence is a better way to move forward than presuming malevolence. When bad things are done by people, it could be that they are evil, but it could also be that maybe something else going on over there. They don't know what the problem is, and we haven't communicated the problem to them.
Right. So I can respect that not assuming malevolence
So just to
is
complete this,
definitely a more. Huh. Go ahead.
so just to complete, sorry, to complete this is that's why if we see malevolence, then the only solution is bhed. Sorry, danda. Sam, dam, danda, bhed. The only solution is if I see malevolence, then I have to destroy. But if I don't jump to the conclusion of malevolence, then sam, dam, and bhed also we can use. Okay, so, and we are as an influential group, we share many concerns with mainstream society, and we can exert influence. So I think sam, dam, bhed are also very important.
So I would agree with you on that Sam Dam Bhed are important on a normal, our generic progress forward as Hindus. That would make
Yes.
sense. But when clearly there is malevolence in I'm talking about in extreme situations such as Bangladesh or in Kashmir,
Yes.
and there's lots of actual point of no return. We've crossed that point where you can't really be all communication is lost in one sense because there's just there's no scope for it. In that situation, wouldn't we truly need, what would be the dand version of a dharmic dand version? Do we where do we stand on that as ISKCON, as Vaishnavas, as a Hindu society? Because the more I hear the Hindutva narrative, the Kattarpanthi narrative, the more the West resists it and thinks that we are all just right-wing extremists as well. So there's this very interesting dynamic that the more we become inclined for dand, this violent approach in the end, it seems like it's just going to be more and more divisive and maybe alienate us from the broader support that Sam, Dam, and what was the third one might help us. Bhed. Right, because we want that, we want diplomacy and advocacy, but if we take on this dand approach in any space, whether it be Bangladesh or Kashmir, immediately we get so much backlash that then the other three approaches might not have a chance. So I don't know, I'm just throwing ideas out there.
I appreciate that point. That's true. See, one thing is that because of various reasons, including, I would say, ignorance and incompetence, not restricted to that, but any kind of Hindu activism is immediately equated with Hindu right-wing fanaticism. That's just, in today's mainstream media, that is just the unfortunate reality. So if we are, so if we are going to live in fear of that, then we will never be able to stand up for ourselves. So we will just be, there is a time, as you said, when danda is required. Now, to draw from our own tradition itself, when Srila Prabhupada was establishing ISKCON, at that time, at two places, in Mayapur, which is our international headquarters, and Mumbai, which Srila Prabhupada considered one of his most important projects in Juhu, the economic, financial capital of India. And both the places, devotees faced physical attacks. Now, there were dacoits. Now, whether they were religiously, ideologically motivated or not, but they came to plunder. They came to desecrate. And then the devotees had guns. And they used those guns. And Prabhupada appreciated that. This is Kshatriya. We have to do this. Of course, they were done in self-defense. Initially, the narrative was spun as if the devotees were aggressors. And there was some problem. But eventually, things came back to right. So it's not that Prabhupada was in principle not recognizing the need for Kshatriya approach. Similarly, when the Juhu temple was being threatened, one of the life members, very prominent supporters, he said, I have been in the army. He says, if you try to stop the construction of this temple, I'll come here with my gun. And he stood guard with him and his son all night. And then when Prabhupada heard about it, Prabhupada said, yes, he's a Kshatriya. So Prabhupada appreciated that. So now we can say, as a movement, ISKCON is 50, 60 years old. We started in 1965 and really took off in 1970. So about 55 years of 1966 onwards. So we are not that big a movement. And our focus has been primarily on creating a Brahminical culture, centered on creating Brahmanas, which is very important in society. But at the same
Absolutely.
time, Kshatriya is also important. So now, if we ourselves, I would say that three things, three ways which we can work. One is that those who are existing, those who are in the movement, some of them themselves get Kshatriya training. Some of them themselves get self-defense training. And in fact, that is quite often necessary. Now, almost all temples do have certain level of security. Now, of course, we may hire outside people, but there are devotees also who oversee that security. So that is
Right.
some of us, those who are already devotees, some of them learn some Kshatriya skills if they have those inclinations. Second is that those who already have Kshatriya inclinations, we focus on cultivating them so that they become devotees and they use their Kshatriya tendencies in a devotional way. And the third is those groups who are already Kshatriya groups, Kshatriya kind of groups. Now we have a healthy relationship with them, by which that when we are in danger, they'll be there to help us. So various approaches are being considered, and and I think during this time there has been a lot of awakening. So yes, there are some situations, as you rightly said, when Sam Dam Bhed, that point of discussion and negotiation is gone. So what we need is to be ready for using the danda also. So
Right.
in my understanding, danda here is more of deterrence. Deterrence,
Deterrence.
that if you do this, this is what is going to happen. That we also can hit back. Not that we
Self-defense.
have to hit back. Yeah, but we can hit back. It's more of justice. It's more of deterrence. So that is
Right.
required. There is that famous story of Narad
Absolutely.
Muni. He once told he once told a snake that, why are you killing people like this? So don't kill. And he said, okay. Then he became very timid and tame. And one day Narad Muni was passing by and the snake was completely bruised. So bruised and battered. He says some small kids were torturing it and beating it up. He says, what happened? He says, you told me not to bite. Now everybody is tormenting me. He says, I told you don't bite, but I didn't tell you don't show your fangs. I didn't tell you don't hiss. Now, you have to act for deterrence. So basically,
Right.
the Kshatriya approach is not ruled out. It is essential in society. That's what the point I was making through this.
I appreciate that. So this comment is quite relevant in the sense that most people, as soon as, because what you're describing is basically a lot of the push for Hindutva, and maybe having an Indian a Hindu Rajya, right? Like seems to be people awakening to the hour, a need of the hour, and saying that, okay, we stand up for Dharma now. This is it. There's enough. We have experienced enough betrayal and violence, and uh, now we are going to stand up for ourselves. But as soon as I use this word Hindutva, especially in the West, because I live in the UK, I get a lot of flack for it.
Hmm.
Immediately it's assumed that it's a radical stance, and that's not where I really feel like we need to have a dialogue so that we can understand that there is a difference between standing up for ourselves and then just being extremely fanatic in our view that Hinduism is the only way. That's not. So I think it segues into the idea that what is this stance, the Vedic stance of a secular nation? Are we
Okay.
meant to, as Hindus, are we secular? And can we
Okay.
withstand? Yeah. Um,
Yeah, that's a very important
uh,
question. See, first of all, Hinduism can never say that it is the only way, because Hinduism doesn't offer only one way. Hinduism itself is offers a multiplicity of paths. In fact, Krishna says, "Ye tha mam prapadyante tam sataiva bhajamyaham. Mama vartamanu vartante manushya partha sarvasha." He says, as all people approach me, I reciprocate with them accordingly. I reward them. And he says, all
right.
people are on my path. So we could say the broad teaching of the Bhagavad-Gita is, I phrase it as, from your place, at your pace, access God's grace. From your place, at your pace, access God's grace. So it's universal. So in that sense, that very idea that we can have only, this is the only way, that is alien to Hinduism. That is not at all
Right.
the case. So having said that, now there is going to be sometimes we have to look at words, and some words just acquire a negative connotation. So for example, Srila Prabhupada used the word cult. The cult of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is spreading all over the world. At that time, cult didn't have a negative connotation. But
Right.
now,
But now it
cult has
does.
a very negative connotation. So at that time,
Right.
cult was simply a group, was simply a
Mhm.
group. It is but now it conveys a very cloistered group of somebody who is controlling and
Close-minded.
brainwashing.
Huh.
Yeah, it's
Brainwashed. Yeah.
close-mindedness. So then best we avoid that language, we avoid that usage. So whether we use the specific word Hindutva or not in particular contexts, that is something which we have to be careful. If the word is going to bring out, just make people put us into a particular mental category and close down the discussion, then the word needn't be used. We can avoid using it temporarily. Now what happens is sometimes people say we are not criticizing Hinduism, we are only criticizing Hindutva. But then all Hindu activism, all Hindu standing for rights is called as Hindutva only. Then what is left of Hinduism is nothing except you do some rituals in your home and you let us do everything and control everything, whatever we want. That's not going to
Right.
work. So in my understanding, equating Hindutva with extremism, that is simply like a very cunning strategy by which all of Hindus are put down. So Hindutva is
Right.
equated with extremism, and all Hindu activism is equated Hinduism. Therefore, all Hindu
Right.
activism, all Hindu advocacy is labeled as extremism and is put down. It is at least given a bad name. So it is a difficult situation to be in. So whether we use a particular word or not, the point is that we need to recognize that we are going to stand up for our rights. And there are some simple
Right.
facts. If Hindutva, say if the current government is said to be the Hindutva government, okay, we may okay, even if you agree with that for argument's sake. But India is the only country in the immediate vicinity. You consider India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, put Sri Lanka aside, Bangladesh, we consider Pakistan. India is the only country in that area where the percentage population of the minorities has increased.
Exactly. Exactly. There's just
Pakistan,
no
the
denying
percentage
it.
of minorities has decreased. Bangladesh, the percentage of minorities has decreased. So if there's such Hindutva extremism in India, then how would the percentage of minorities be increasing? Put aside
Exactly.
everything else, occasional flare-ups and riots, put aside all everything else. So if we start with raw data, then there is clear evidence that the minorities are flourishing. If you consider cricket, there are so many
Right.
Muslims and even Christians who have been in the Indian cricket team. Now, how many Hindus have been there in the Pakistani cricket team? How many Hindus have been there in
Right.
the Bangladeshi cricket team? You may say that their population is very small. Okay, but
There's a reason why it's so
10%
small.
out of 11 players, can't one player be there? No, there's only one
Yeah.
player, and he had so much abuse that he left in Pakistan. Bangladesh has never had anything like that. So who is discriminating? Who is discriminating?
Exactly.
So I think rather than fixating on labels, which make people aggressive and make us put us on the defensive, we can avoid the labels and focus on the facts.
Right. I
So
really
now,
appreciate that.
yeah, so labels sometimes create negative vibes. So now coming to secularism, see again, secularism is, like I said, Dharma has many meanings. So secularism can also have many different meanings. But at a basic level, if we how did the idea of secularism start? That now there are many different understandings of it, but let's take one understanding of secularism is the idea of separation of state and religion. Separation of state and religion. And that people should be able to practice their own faith. And the
Right.
state should not impose any particular faith on anyone. Now that was the basic idea. So now if we consider this as basic secularism, the separation of state and religion. Now what is religion? Religion is about whom one worships, what what conception of ultimate reality one has, and the state is considered with law. It is considered with it's concerned with maintaining basic welfare in society. So if we consider this
Right.
dynamic, that there is law, the state's purview is to protect law, and religion's purview is to guide in faith,
Right.
faith traditions. So then, even in the Vedic tradition, we could say that there is this dynamic of dharma and bhakti. So rather than equating religion with dharma, from the Vedic perspective, religion would be more equated with bhakti.
Bhakti.
So dharma is, as I said earlier, it's more of duty, it's more of harmony. So dharma would mean it is law and order. So if you consider, often the Bhagavad-Gita is said to have been spoken before a dharma yuddha. It is a war of dharma. But it's a very overlooked fact that it is not that it was a set of it was basically a fight against wrongdoers. The Kauravas had done many wrongs to the Pandavas, and they had grabbed their kingdom, and they're not ready to return the kingdom. Significantly, on both sides, there were people who worship different deities. So it was not Vaishnavas against it was not against Krishna Bhaktas or Vishnu Bhaktas against some other Bhaktas. So Bhishma on the side of the Kauravas was a Vaishnava. Then Bhurishrava was a Vaishnava. Drupada on the Pandava side was primarily a Shaivite. Drupada's family deity was Shiva. So here we see that the point is that it was not a religious war in the sense which we would use it today. It is not a religious war. It was basically, it is not that, see, there is this concept of you could say, religion as is understood in the West, in the Abrahamic traditions, is considered concerned with non-believers or disbelievers. Disbelievers or wrong believers. So the Muslims may call Hindus as kafirs, or anybody who's not a Muslim as kafir. The Christians may call others as pagans. So this is concerned with wrong belief. But or non-believers or disbelievers. But the Bhagavad-Gita or the Kurukshetra war was not fought against non-believers per se. It was fought against wrongdoers.
Right.
Duryodhana was a wrongdoer.
Such a nuanced but very powerful difference.
Oh, very powerful. Wrongdoer is something which is a law and order issue. See, Krishna did not tell Duryodhana, you become my devotee and we will settle this issue. He didn't demand that from him. He said, just give the kingdom back. So it was not a war of beliefs. It was a more of a law and order issue. So this difference between dharma and bhakti, that itself creates the foundation for secularism within the Vedic context. That even when Yudhishthir became the king, Yudhishthir became the emperor of the world, but that doesn't mean that all the kings under him, leave alone all the kings who were under him, even all his citizens, that didn't mean he imposed Vaishnavism on all of them. No. That was his preference, his choice. His worshipable deity was Vishnu Krishna, and he worshipped. And he was not, you could say, abashed about it. He was not shy about it. He was quite openly worshipping Krishna. And that's why he offered Krishna the Agra Puja, the worship of the position of being the most foremost person during his coronation in the Pushpa, in the Rajasuya Yajna. But he was not imposing really his bhakti on others. See, bhakti is a matter of personal choice. But dharma is a social necessity. Law and order is not a matter of personal choice. Now, whether I worship a particular deity or not, that's up to me. But if I drive drunk on the road, that's not a matter of personal choice, because I'm harming others. So this difference is very important. So in that sense, the Vedic teachings are inherently secular, because they allow different people to worship different deities, and there's no imposition of faith. So in that sense, we could say that long before the idea of secularism came either in Europe or America, depending on what definition of secularism you use, but it's actually, secularism was already inherent within the Vedic teachings, Vedic context.
Exactly.
But the problem is, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you're saying something.
Finish.
You can complete.
Well, I just thought that I think because what you're expressing is so nuanced, I don't think most people would have picked up that there's a clear difference between religion and doing the right thing, just
Yes.
societal, law and order. So I think most people are confusing the fact that actually these two are the same thing. This is just if you're not, the secular idea in India is difficult when confronted with violence along the borders. You got Kashmir and Pakistan, Bangladesh, and we're constantly being attacked. It is seen as a religious issue as opposed to just fighting against straight up unacceptable behavior. So I suppose my question is, okay, we understand that the Vedic concept is secular. It's not a religious nation. It's not imposing religion. Dharma is not a position of religion. I understand that point you're making, but what would dharma be when we are being attacked like this?
Okay.
What
Yeah.
would be the dharma? Yes, I think
I
that's my
agree. I
question.
understand your question. Yeah. So again, the problem, as I said, the difference between dharma and bhakti comes up because in Hindi, in the vernacular languages, dharma is associated with religion. Dharma
Hmm.
is associated with religion. It is not associated with ethics or duty or anything like that, and certainly not with nature. So, but this
Hmm.
principle, I think it is well understood. Even in the history of India, there were at different times some kings, Krishna Dev Raya was a Vaishnava, some other kings were Shaivites. But generally speaking, most kings did not persecute other faiths. Most it
No.
didn't happen. It very very rare. It didn't happen really. So we're not saying that it never happened, because there are extremes can
Hmm.
always be possible. But overall, there is nothing intrinsic which will lead to intolerance. And see,
Hmm.
when even if you see because of this ethos itself, right from the beginning of whatever record of history we have, when the Jews were persecuted, some of the early Jews came to India, and they found sanctuary in India. Then even when when the Middle East, when the original people, the Parsis and others living in Middle East, they felt persecuted because of Islamic expansionism over there. They came to India,
Hmm.
and the Parsis are a
Hmm.
small but still a thriving community in India. And if you consider that way, the Buddhists, when Tibet fell to China, Buddhists came to India. The Dalai Lama has a place in India, and they've been given
Right.
place. They're flourishing. So it's not just something which you're talking about at Yudhishthir's times, and it's not
Hmm.
just limited to the forms of worship given in the Vedic tradition. We may say Buddhism or Sikhism or Parsi religion; they might not be in the Vedic tradition, but that
Hmm.
ethos was was something which is very much there in the tradition. So when I grew up in a Hindu Brahmin family, and my parents admitted me to a convent school. So I learned about Bible over there, and
Hmm.
I just it was just natural for me, the way I was nurtured and grew up, that yeah, this is another way to God. It is not that,
Exactly.
that is something which is aggressive against us, and that I
Hmm.
have to choose between these. No, it was not there at all. So we could say
Right.
what we call as, actually it's not just religious tolerance, because even the word religious
Hmm.
tolerance implies something like you are a nuisance but I'll tolerate you.
Right.
That is the idea of tolerance,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Hmm.
So you're a
Yeah.
nuisance but I will tolerate you. But
Anji.
you could say it's more of religious acceptance, that there are diverse
Hmm.
ways, and there are diverse ways by which people can raise their consciousness. So this ethos is very much there within our tradition. Ekam sat
Hmm.
vipra bahuda vidanti. The Rig Veda says that there is one truth which is known by many different names. So the idea of multiplicity of understandings of the ultimate, the multiplicity of approaches to the ultimate, that is very much there in the Vedic tradition. So in that
Hmm.
sense, if India is to let various faiths flourish, that is definitely been happening always. But today, secularism in India means something else, and that's where a big problem comes up. So
Hmm.
overall, what happened is, I would say three things have happened, and somehow we Hindus in general when I say that we, I'm not putting myself out of it. We have all been responsible for it in some way or the other, maybe out of our ignorance or our incompetence. That three things happened which shifted secularism from, you could say, neutrality toward religion. The state is neutral
Right.
towards various religions. From there, it has shifted towards partiality toward minority religions. And
Right.
that could also be okay in some ways. I'll explain when it is okay and when it's not okay. But it has even shifted further than that to antipathy toward the majority religion. So secularism, it doesn't just mean neutrality towards all religions. It has come to mean
Right.
partiality toward minority religions and antipathy towards the mainstream religion. And that is why,
Right.
and this is the version of secularism which many Hindus, especially many Hindu activists, feel highly worked up about. So,
Right.
simple examples for this. That I know in your UK we have this Krishna Avanti school where the
Right.
UK government actually funds the education of the children. Now, in
Right.
India, to start a Hindu school is incredibly difficult.
It would be
And
such a hoo-ha. It would be a
no,
complete
no, not just hoo-ha,
fiasco.
no. You can start a Hindu school. The legal obstacles are so many. If you have a Hindu
Right.
school, you have to some extent, get a lot of permissions, and then you have to employ people from the minority religion. You have to admit minority religion students, and there are so many legal loopholes that have to be passed. But to start a Muslim school or to start a Christian school, the problems are far lesser. The path is much easier. So I could
So
go into the
strange.
legalities of this, but this is very complicated. This is so many of the Hindu temples in India are actually controlled by the government. So the funds from the temples, the donations which come to people, come to the temples, they
So
go to the government.
unacceptable.
Yeah, this is outrageous.
It's
This is
so
outrageous. In fact, Prabhupada was very, very concerned about this, and that's why he tried to create the administration of ISKCON in such a way that the government would not be able to take control of it. So it doesn't do
wow.
that for any other religious organization. It doesn't do it for Muslim mosques and churches or anything else.
How do they
But
justify
there are
this?
many.
Yeah.
Well, there are. I could go into the history, but the thing is that two, three things. First is that in the past, temples were sources of great wealth because people gave a lot of charity, and temples were sources of wealth. So, and relatively speaking, the places of worship in the minority religion are not that much centers of wealth. Now, there are different understandings of this, but so when India became independent, and especially when India adopted socialist model, the idea was that we want to redistribute wealth to bring about greater equality. But how do we bring about greater equality? For that, we take the wealth from the wealthy and give it to the poor. Give it to the poor. So in doing this, they didn't designate churches and mosques as wealthy, but they designated temples as wealthy because temples had a lot of money. And then now this is one part of the story. You could go. There are many parts of that story, but basically that's what has happened. So that's why secularism raises the ire of many Hindus. It's not that Hindus
Right.
want a Hindu state where no other faith will be allowed. I don't think
Right.
even the most right-wing Hindus really want that. That's not the Hindu ethos at all.
Right.
What they
Exactly.
don't want is that Hindus in our own birthland are not allowed to practice their own faith properly, are not allowed to feel threatened. So the thing is, I talked about two things. There's a favoring the minority religions and partiality towards the minority and antipathy towards the majority. So sometimes this
Yes.
happens. Now, to some extent, favoring the minority could be understood because the minorities are weak, they may be threatened, they may be persecuted. So the minorities may need some additional facilities, additional support. So that is understandable. It is understandable, especially in the Western context. I would say in the Abrahamic religious context, because the whole religious ideology is this is the only way. This is the only way. Whichever main religion is there, most of the people in that religion, they believe that this is the only way. And therefore, they don't really have a good regard for other religions, minorities. Therefore, they need protection. But in Hinduism doesn't think that. It's not in the DNA of Hinduism itself. So now let me nuance this point. When I say that other religions say that this is the only way, Christianity or Islam, it's not that I'm in any way implying that all teachers of Islam or Christianity teach the same thing with the same emphasis, and certainly not that
No.
all Muslims and Christians are intolerant. But that sort of statements are found in their scriptures quite prominently.
For sure. Overall, yeah. Overall, there is a
How they are understood and lived depends on their teachers and followers. But that kind of statements had never been central to the Hindu ethos. So that's why even that partiality towards the minority is not necessary, but especially the antipathy towards the majority religion.
right.
That is something to the matter of huge concern. In the entire Indian educational system, a student can study the entire educational system and never come to know anything really about the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, the Bhagavad-Gita. These are not just religious books. They are books which have shaped Indian civilization. So they are a part of our literary legacy. So don't study these books as religious books. Study them as literary books. Study them as books which have influenced Indian society. So anyway, that's a big subject. But my point I'm making is that secularism is not the problem. The way secularism has been implemented in India, where it has become antipathy toward the majority religion, that is the problem. And that is the version of secularism which is being protested against.
Right. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So I just wanted to, I suppose, move on to the idea that how can we, whether we're Vaishnavas, Shaivites, any kind of Sanatan Dharma followers, how can we be united in a way so that we don't become resentful? We should feel anger, like we had already discussed. We should feel anger. We should feel these emotions. And you talked about how we should gain clarity through Brahminical culture and Shastra Adhyan, I suppose. But there still seems to be a great divide within the Hindu community. There's many quotes here. One I'm going to actually show his comments because he keeps going on and on about it. Because there is this idea: ISKCON only promotes Krishna consciousness and not Sanatan Dharma. And he might have a point here that there is some divisive rhetoric within ISKCON. I've heard it even on one of your podcasts. Not you, but one of your guests is a white devotee, and he's like, Bhakti is not Hindu. Or other such statements like we are not Hindu. In an effort to maybe be a little bit more nuanced about our philosophy, that we believe in one God and so this one supreme reality, we tend to alienate ourselves from other Hindus. And on the other hand, we've got other groups that are doing similar, spreading similar rhetoric. The Sikhs are like, we're not Hindu. We do, everybody's got their own thing going on. But in terms of uniting to protect Dharma, I think whether you're Buddhist or Sikh or Jain or ISKCON follower, I think that is something we would all be able to get behind, to protect the moral and ethical values of a society, to protect our God-given right to practice our religion. I think most people will be able to stand up behind it. So my point is, how can we unite? How can we stop this? Is there hope?
Okay.
This divisive rhetoric.
Oh yeah, definitely. See, the two things I said that let me share a PPT. When as devotees, sometimes we say that we are not Hindus. That is a particular statement which it has to be understood carefully. If you don't understand it carefully, even not only those who are speaking it, but those who are listening to it also. So let me share my screen here. Okay. Window, yeah. Share. So here, let's make it full screen. So basically, can you see me? Can you see my screen?
Yes, I've shared it. Yes.
So basically, there is this idea that most people live the materialistic way, that I am the body. And the other extreme is a pendulum. That's one extreme of the pendulum, to identify I am myself with the body only. But the other extreme is to say I am the soul and not the body at all. So
Mm.
now that is also true at one level. But if you see in the Bhagavad-Gita in 2:13, Krishna tells Arjuna that you are the soul inside the body. But in the very next verse, he refers to Arjuna as Kaunteya and Bharata, the son of Kunti and the
Right.
descendant of the Bharata, descendant of the king Bharata. So if he's
Right.
not this body, why is Krishna talking about him in terms of the
His
body?
bodily designation.
Because
Yes.
but it's a functional identity which is important in its own
Mm.
role. So there is a fundamental identity that we are souls.
Right.
But we have functional identity. So all of us have functional identity. So when I go to America, I may be, or I come to UK, I may actually come to talk about our spirituality,
Mm.
to say, explain how we are souls. But at the American
Mm.
immigration, I can't say I'm a soul. I have to say I'm an Indian and I have to show my Indian passport. Isn't
Right.
it? So the
Yeah.
functional identity is important. So we can't just
Mm.
dismiss the functional identity.
Mhm.
So there is a functional identity and there's fundamental identity. So the idea is that the way to function is, I remember that I'm the soul, but I also remember I am in the body presently. And we act in harmony with our functional identity to come to harmony with our fundamental identity. That means I act as an Indian, I act as depend on my relationship, I act as a son, a sibling, a relative, a friend, whatever it is. I act in harmony, I act in the harmonic way in these relationships so that I ultimately realize my fundamental identity. So this same
Right.
dynamic we could apply to Hinduism. So we could say, is Krishna consciousness Hinduism? Well, no, because Krishna consciousness is transcendental. But that is in sense of the fundamental reality. But so if we are going to put Krishna consciousness within the religious categorization of the world, are we going to put in Islam or Christianity? Obviously not. There is a religious category, demographic classification in this world, and the functional identity is always shaped in terms of those demographic classifications. So just like at one level it is said that Vrindavan is in the spiritual world. To Vrindavan is
Right.
actually the spiritual world and is in the spiritual world. And to say that Vrindavan is a part of the material, is actually a part of the material world, is to see
Yeah.
it with material vision, is considered offensive, which is okay. But if you want to consider geographical divisions of the world, we are not going to put Vrindavan in China or Pakistan or Bangladesh. Vrindavan within geographical decisions of India is in India. So
Right.
similarly, Krishna consciousness is within Hinduism. You can say at one level it's transcendental to Hinduism, but at another level it is very much within the Hindu tradition. So that
Right.
functional identity we cannot dismiss it completely. And Srila Prabhupada, for all his Srila Prabhupada taught transcendental philosophy, but at the same time, Prabhupada was also very practical. So it was practical in the sense that whenever devotees were threatened, whenever temples were threatened, at that time Prabhupada would say that he would seek help from the government, from influential politicians in India. He would seek help from patrons, and then he would say that a Hindu temple is being threatened, the Hindu devotees are being threatened. So what happens is, if we take only one side and obsess over it, then it becomes a problem. So
I agree.
is ISKCON promoting only Krishna consciousness and not Sanatana Dharma? Well, yes and no. Yes, ISKCON, as the name says, is it's International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So our focus is on talking about Krishna. But does
Right.
that mean we don't want people to come to the level of Dharma? Does that mean that we are going to condemn anybody who doesn't come to Krishna consciousness? No,
Right.
I know many friends from my college days and thereafter. They didn't really become devotees in the sense we use the word, but through their interactions with me and with other devotees whom they interacted through me, they have gained a greater appreciation of Indian culture. They have gained a greater appreciation of Indian wisdom. They have evolved in their understanding of Dharma. So
Right.
my understanding is like a pyramid. Pyramid means that wherever a person is, the Vedic tradition offers people resources to rise up from
Right.
there. So we could say that ISKCON is focusing on helping people come to Krishna consciousness. But if somebody is not ready to come to Krishna consciousness right now, that doesn't mean that we reject them or condemn them. It only means that, okay, they can take the wisdom of the Gita, they can take the wisdom of the Ramayana, Mahabharata, and apply it in their way and their lives and raise their consciousness a little bit. So Prabhupada was appreciative of that. Now, this is actually the purpose of Krishna consciousness. One of the purposes is to, Prabhupada gave many different purposes of the ISKCON. One of them was to build temples for Krishna and to help create a community around Krishna. But another was, you could say, a basic definition of Dharma, to correct the imbalance between material and spiritual values. And correcting that balance between material and spiritual values is Dharma. So many of the life members who helped Prabhupada, the same life member whom I talked about, who was Kshatriya standing with a gun, he was actually a initiated disciple of a prominent Mayavadi guru. But Prabhupada did not. Prabhupada did not have issues with that. He was interested in Prabhupada as a sadhu. He wanted to serve, and Prabhupada engaged him in service. So Prabhupada was expert enough to see that different people are coming from different backgrounds. And for some people, we focus on bhakti. And with some people, we focus on dharma. And in that way, we can connect to different people at different levels. So sometimes if now this person who has made this comment, it could be possible that they have met devotees who are focusing only on bhakti, and they don't really recognize that there are multiple levels. So that might give the perception that, we teach only Krishna consciousness. Yes, we do teach Krishna consciousness, but we also offer resources for raising consciousness. And even if somebody doesn't want to raise their consciousness up to Krishna, well, whatever wisdom, whatever level they want to go up, they're welcome. So in that sense, we're not, you could say, see, there's a difference between being sectarian and being specifically devoted. Sectarian would mean that this is the only way. But specifically devoted is, yes, this is what we worship. We are not going to deny that. But some devotees, if they impose that on others, that is a problem.
That's their own immaturity.
And it has happened, unfortunately.
I've noticed. Yeah.
That's their immaturity.
So
that's their immaturity, yes.
It's their own immaturity. It's a lack of understanding of how accepting Krishna actually is. The depth of this teaching. Like we've been discussing this whole talk actually, that it is very inclusive, very accepting. It's not just tolerating another perspective. It's actually accepting that people have different opinions. I really liked what you said, that dharma is a way to balance spiritual and material. What did you say? If you could repeat that, please. Dharma is a way to balance.
To restore the imbalance between material and spiritual values. To restore the imbalance between material and spiritual values.
Okay.
So like earlier I talked about clarity, energy and apathy. So that is rajas and tamas. When rajas and tamas become too much, they take control completely. That's when a person goes towards adharma. But some amount of sattva is there, then there is dharma.
Right.
So before I move to this point, I just like to share one more point, if you don't mind. See what has happened even within ISKCON to some extent. There is a tendency to overemphasize philosophy. So what happens is, if you see this, people have many different dimensions to them. There's a philosophical dimension, there's a cultural dimension, there's a social dimension, there's a professional dimension, there's an intellectual dimension, there's a national dimension. People are multifaceted beings. So we might say somebody might be, we say, impersonalist, somebody worships a particular devta. That is one aspect of who they are.
Right.
That is one aspect of who they are. But here you'll see what has happened is that person has been reduced, or rather the philosophical aspect is so highlighted that the person is labeled only according to their philosophy. So Prabhupada didn't do that. Prabhupada saw people as multifaceted. There's a fascinating incident which happened in Prabhupada's life. So Srila Prabhupada was when he came to America for the first time, he was hosted by one Dr. Mishra of the yoga studio. He had a yoga studio, and he happened to be Advaitik. And they couldn't get along very well. He didn't let Prabhupada speak about Krishna. And then Prabhupada went his separate way after some time. But many decades, many years later, this Dr. Mishra came to meet Prabhupada. And then Prabhupada had lunch with him and they talked very nicely. And then after that, when he left, some of the disciples of Srila Prabhupada asked, Prabhupada, I thought he was a Mayavadi. So Prabhupada said, philosophically, we argue like anything, but culturally, we are friends.
Right.
It's a profound statement. Philosophically, we argue like anything, but culturally, we are friends. So Prabhupada could see these multi-dimensions of people. And in this context, he said, just because we have philosophical disagreements, doesn't necessarily mean that I have to treat this person as an enemy. We're still friends. So in this case, what happens is sometimes for us, if we are going to be attacked by right-wing extremists from particular religions, they are not going to care whether we worship a devata or we worship Krishna or we are personalists or impersonalists.
Exactly.
For them, we are all whatever. We are all people who are disbelievers. So there are times when the cultural difference is to be, when philosophical difference is to be emphasized, and there are times when the philosophical difference needs to be de-emphasized, and the cultural similarity needs to be emphasized. This is where in the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had this teaching of achintya bheda abhed. So bhed is difference and abhed is non-difference. So there are times when we focus on philosophical bhed, that okay, this is your philosophy, this is my philosophy, this is specifically whom you worship, this is specifically who I worship. There are times for the differentiation, but there are also times to focus on cultural abhed. Right. That culturally we are very similar. We all worship deities, we all respect the Vedas, we all want to take care of cows, we all have our holy places in Bharatvarsha. So there is so much cultural abhed. When Srila Prabhupada was in Kolkata, at that time there was this big Durga Puja going on. Durga Puja was very big in Kolkata. Now many devotees say this is just Devata worship. But when Prabhupada was asked about this, Prabhupada, are these Durga worshippers better, or are Christians who worship one God better? Now Prabhupada said that these Devata worshippers are better because they are in the house of the Vedas. They're in the house of the Vedas. Now I wouldn't absolutize this answer. I wouldn't absolutize because we also have to see what is individual consciousness. Again, Sattva, Rajas, Tamas has to be considered. And you could say that there could be some Christians who would be Sattvic, and there could be some Devata worshippers who could be Rajasic, or there could be some Christians and Muslims who could be Tamasic, and there could be Devata worshippers who would be Sattvic. So individual nuancing has to be there. But my understanding what Prabhupada was saying is that for somebody who is a worshipper of Durga, there are far lesser cultural and conceptual barriers for them to understand the highest dharma, for them to rise toward higher consciousness. On the other hand, somebody who's outside the house of the Vedas, for them to rise toward higher consciousness, it's possible, but at least for them to appreciate Krishna and Krishna consciousness is going to be quite difficult. So this is an example of Prabhupada not focusing on philosophical or theological differences, but looking at cultural similarities and valuing the cultural proximity. So somehow, if we don't recognize that Prabhupada's approach was nuanced, the Vedic teachings are nuanced, and we take one thing and make it into everything. Okay, you are considered God to be impersonal, or you worship this particular deity, I worship this particular deity. Well, okay, that is a matter of difference at a particular level. But when there are big dangers, but we're all together in danger, then we have to come together. We have to unite. So otherwise, it's like, with respect to I think when the Holocaust came, there's a European who wrote this poem. It's quite well known. I says they came for the socialists, and I spoke nothing because I was not a socialist. Then they came from the trade unionists, and I spoke nothing because I was not a trade unionist. They came for the Jews, and I spoke nothing because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and then there was no one left to speak for me.
Wow.
There's no one left to speak for me. So when there is a common danger, we can't just say that, oh, we are not affected by it. We are affected, and we need to have the focus on the abhed at that point. That culturally we are very, very similar. And that's why there's a shared common danger which we have to deal with unitedly. So presently, yeah, go ahead.
Well,
Go
I
ahead,
just
please.
think that's such a wonderful point that even for swarthy reasons, for selfish reasons, we must look towards unity. It's just common sense that if
Yes.
we just have to learn how to get along, we need to learn how to respect each other. And personally, I think dialogue is really really important. Communication, having these kind of conversations, and I'm looking towards if anyone is willing to have a deeper philosophical, spiritual, sattva guni communication and conversation, please do comment, and we're very happy to include that. Because truly, samvad, having mutually respectful conversations would really help us unite. But if I may say that what I'm finding personally as lacking amongst us Hindus is an actual crisis of faith and practice. Personally, if I look around towards Hindus, especially because I live in the UK, in the West, it is completely overridden with an materialistic, goal. We're Hindu on Navratri, Diwali, Shivratri. On the certain days of the year, we become Hindu. We go to the temple. We may pray. But most of the time, there is actually no real spiritual practice. And therefore, when something like this happens, when Dharma needs protection, it's hard to come together because there's no practice of Dharma, like in one sense. There's no practice of this overall sense of spirituality that I can see where there's a lacking for reason to join. If you could
Yes,
maybe.
that is so true. I agree with you fully. The problem is if we have no roots, our personal roots in what Hinduism teaches and what Hinduism offers.
Sorry.
Yeah, no
Yeah.
problem. So then if we
Right.
have no personal roots, no personal grounding in what Hinduism is teaching, then either we don't care, or even if we care, actually, is your net going off? Because my bandwidth is okay.
I can hear you fine.
I'm losing you in between. Anyway,
Acha.
I'll continue. So what happens is, at one level, if we are not really having some practice of dharma, of grounding in dharma, some sadhana, some movement toward bhakti, then what will happen is either we won't care, or if we care, then the defining identity, who is a Hindu, it is one who
Is lost.
opposes Muslims.
हाँ,
It becomes the opposite
यही
identity.
identity
Who is
रह
a
गया.
Hindu? One who opposes Muslims.
बिल्कुल.
Then that is a negative identity to have. That is not a healthy identity to have. Yes,
Exactly.
if some Muslims are threatening us and we have to protect ourselves. But if somebody starts, if their whole idea is, I am a Hindu, and what does Hindu dharma mean? Or protected against from aggressions from certain people. Well, that is only one part. So now it is true in all religions that the committed followers are going to be relatively few. Now there are, if you consider Christians, Christianity doesn't even demand too much commitment. It's just like go to the church once a week and offer some prayers, read your Bible. There is not such emphasis on sadhana. But even that much, not all Christians practice that. So that is always going to be there. That not everybody who is belonging to a particular religious denomination is going to be a committed practitioner. But if at least there is some level of connection, so there's some level of connection by which they have appreciation. This is one thing which I have observed. It's interesting that Indians, when they are in India, often they don't care much for Indian culture, Indian religion, Indian traditions. They just want to do well in life, advance their career. When they come to the West, then also initially they're involved in that, they want to further their career. But once they have children, then they become very concerned. We want our values to be passed on to our children. And that's the time when they start exploring. Okay, who can, even I don't know these values. Who can teach these to them? Where are the way to teach them? So there are times when people will naturally evolve towards religion, towards a higher level of spiritual connection. But what happens is that we need to provide facilities at various levels for people to stay connected. So if somebody cannot do sadhana, give them opportunity to do some seva. As I talked earlier about Prabhupada, most of the life members who helped Prabhupada, none of them became initiated devotees. None of them became sadhakas in the technical sense of the word in which we use in ISKCON. But they did a lot of seva. So in one sense, we can have multiple levels of connecting with people. And there are some people who would very much want to, say, connect in terms of advocacy, connect in terms of, say, like now what you are doing is, you are shaping minds and shaping hearts in a way that is more receptive toward dharma and bhakti. So nobody told you to do this. We are all doing it in our own particular ways, but in one sense, as a brahmachari, that's all that I am meant to do. But you have many other things. You are doing this, and this is wonderful. So actually, what is important is that somehow there is this. Actually, that mentality is more in the Abrahamic religion, the Masiha complex. The Masiha complex is some Masiha will come and deliver us. That was there in Judaism, that is there in Christianity. But somehow it is there. In our tradition also it is there that maybe some outstanding spiritual leader will come and change things. Some extraordinary political leader will come and change things.
But we'll still criticize. Biggest criticizers of Modi are Hindus. Anyways, it's very unfortunate.
See, it's a everybody operates under constraints that we don't know about. So under those constraints, what they are doing, why they are doing certain things, why they are not doing certain things, we can't from outside. It's difficult to judge, but each of us can actually do our part in protecting dharma, in understanding dharma, in sharing wisdom about dharma with others. So if we can actually take that responsibility ourselves, there are so many resources to share. There's so many resources which each of us, we can understand, we can appreciate, we can share with others. And there is actually a lot that we can, in ISKCON traditionally, we focus on distributing books, distribute books and attract people to read books. I would say in today's world, if we share good social media posts, not just inflammatory posts about how bad these people are, but really posts about which are sharing the wisdom of the Bhagavad-Gita, the wisdom of the Dharmic traditions, explaining how they address issues in a deep, holistic way, then there is so much goodwill that can be created. Somehow, what has happened is that Hinduism has influenced the West, but because Hindus were not advocating it, the influence has been divorced from Hinduism. See, yoga has become very popular in the West, but yoga, how it is portrayed is, actually yoga has nothing to do with Hinduism. Yoga came from those ancient traditions. Yoga came from those ancient traditions before Hinduism evolved. So yoga is good, but Hindus who worship monkeys and elephants, they are foolish people. They are foolish people. So that
if
that
this
is because,
doesn't wake us up, for such a powerful point, because what you're saying
is this bad people?
Go ahead.
No, you can please.
Well, I was just saying, if we don't do the advocacy ourselves, then somebody else will take the credit. I was just having this conversation today with a friend. If we are not going to stand up for ourselves and sorry, are you there? We're having some technical glitch there.
Hare Krishna, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Right. So what I was saying is that if we don't,
so if we are not, if we are not going to stand up for ourselves,
then we should not be shocked and surprised when somebody else comes in and the minorities start increasing. We cannot be hurtful and resentful when Muslims who are following very staunchly, they come in and kind of take over, or the Westerners come in and very soon we'll hear that yoga is a Western idea. There's the Bible's written in Sanskrit. Very soon we will hear that actually Sanskrit is a Western creation. If we don't take responsibility.
Yeah.
Have you heard of the Bible written in Sanskrit? I went to one Sanskrit website and all of the words are in Sanskrit because they are taking it seriously. So now this is a wake up call for me. If any Hindus are listening, especially in the West, that we cannot just be Hindus on one day of the year or just to tick a box that yes, my grandparents, my ancestry is Hindu. But in reality, if we are not taking the time to do Shastra Dhyan, to have some, actual purification, spiritual practice every day, then we are going to lose it. And it will be our fault.
True. Yeah. See, it's always, how should I put it that? It's always better to focus on what we can do right rather than what others are doing wrong. Because
Right.
if we focus on what others are doing wrong, that is actually the
Can't change it.
recipe for mental ill health. Not just helplessness, but mental ill health. Because what happens is, oh, this person is bad, this person is bad, this person is that, this person is bad. What is the end result of that? I just start thinking the whole world is bad and I fill myself with negativity. So it's like a self-pity party. It doesn't help anyone. So yes, there are people who are doing wrong things, but what can I do right now? What can I do right? And if each of us start, then all of us are parts of Krishna. And when Krishna tells Arjuna, Nimitta matram bhava sauvesachi, be an instrument for the divine to act in the world. So the divine can act through each one of us. And we all can
Yes.
play our part. So our tradition, as I said, we have contributed a lot. Say, for example, now animal rights are a matter of big concern in the Western world. And
Yeah.
although there could be some differentiation between veganism and vegetarianism, but there are many similarities. And the point is that that concern was very much there in India. India is the world's most vegetarian country. But even then, somehow, see, in the West, turning vegetarian or vegan is considered cool. But in India, even now, people think, oh, you want to become modern, you should start eating non-veg. So, actually, in many ways, from what I read about the history in 1960s, 1970s, it was Prabhupada who was the first, among the first people who actually started promoting a vegetarian diet. Before that, in the West, the idea was that if you have to be a vegetarian, then you'll have to eat vegetables for the rest of your life. There's no idea of vegetarian cuisines.
They should come to an
And
ISKCON feast.
so Prabhupada introduced that. But what has happened is, because of various reasons, now we are not really we are caught in the dialogue, we are got in the controversy about veganism. And where this whole movement, I would say that this is in the West also, there is rising of human consciousness happening. Rising of human consciousness in terms of veganism. And in many ways, the Gita's theology, Vedic theology, is very much in harmony with that. But we are not contributing in that direction. We are not. So yoga has affected the West. Animal rights is changing. Even environmental consciousness among the various religions of the world, the Vedic tradition has the greatest to offer for environmental consciousness, because the idea of nature, Bhumi Devi, earth is intrinsically sacred for us. So anyway, the point I was going to make through this is that if we stand up only when somebody hurts us and then we think that we have to hurt them back, then we will continue to be portrayed negatively in the media. We'll be seen as reactionary.
Yes.
But if we stand up to present the things that are good in our tradition, we embody them ourselves and then we share them with others, then gradually what will happen is the perception of the mainstream media or of people in general about India will gradually change. So there are many good
But we
things which
can
have
also
come from
advocate.
India.
We can only advocate
No,
that
just let me
which we
complete this point.
practice. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, exactly. There are many good things which come from India, but Indians don't practice it.
Exactly.
In the West, yoga is very popular, but how many Indians practice yoga? In the West, even as I said, vegan animal rights consciousness, all that is very common. But how many Indians are involved in it? So it's our own tradition. Others take it, and then others take credit for it. But if we represent it, then we can actually, there is so much which not only just to create positive perception of Hinduism, but actually to make a positive contribution to the world. There is so much that our tradition offers. So
and
we
taking
need to,
ownership.
Exactly, yeah.
Not just
ownership
by
not
label,
in the sense of
groupthink.
ownership not in the sense of possessiveness, but ownership in the sense of responsibility.
Sorry, I meant that. Self-responsibility. So there's so many questions happening here. I thought if you have time, Prabhu, do you have a little bit? I know you have to do another lecture soon. Maybe we can have you back on, but should I take a few questions or should we do it another day? There's still 250 people watching, so I thought... Oh, have I lost you?
Yeah,
can you
just now you came back. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear anything.
Oh,
yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, I was just saying, should I take a few questions if you have some time? I know you're aware.
Yeah,
I'm aware that
sure,
you have
please.
to go soon. Okay.
Yeah, please. Yes,
this is an interesting comment. मैं पूजा नहीं करता, लेकिन मैं नास्तिक हूँ, लेकिन मैं हिंदू हूँ. This I find very curious because obviously, we have a space for many different belief systems in the Hindu umbrella. But this is something new for me. Can we be Nastic and be Hindu at the same time? I don't know if that's reconcilable.
Yeah. That's an interesting comment. You may say that we are broad-minded, but are we so broad-minded to accept even those who are atheists? That's a good question. My answer will be twofold. That generally, in the Bhagavad-Gita, there is an analysis based on the modes, sattva, rajas, and tamas, and then there is an analysis based on devotional orientation. That is somebody believing in God, is somebody worshipping God, is somebody devoted to God, and both those frames of analysis are given in the Bhagavad-Gita. So now, if somebody is born in a Hindu family, then you could say that generically or demographically they will be identified as Hindus, but they may not necessarily inherit the beliefs of that particular faith. So in that sense, they may say, I'm a Hindu atheist. So now, rather than saying whether it's possible to be a Hindu and atheist, my question would be different. That when you say you're atheist, what is your conception of the God that you are rejecting? Because quite often, when somebody says I'm an atheist, like I say, I was in America in a college and said one student said I'm an atheist. I said, yeah, okay. So I asked the same question. I said, what is the conception of God that you don't believe? I don't believe in any God. No, but tell me, what is your conception of God that you say you don't believe in? He says, I don't believe in a God who sends those who don't believe him to hell. I said, even I don't believe in such a God. I said, even I don't believe in such a God.
Wow,
so,
great. Yeah.
So my understanding would be most people who are atheists, they are not philosophical atheists. There may be some, but they are more like, you could say, psychological atheists. That means they've had some negative experiences, negative conceptions. Emotionally, they have I was in Texas and I was going for a program. So in front of there's a car driving, and in the car there was a slogan at in the back of the car. It says, "Oh God, please save me from your preachers." Oh God, please save me from your preachers.
बिल्कुल ठीक है.
So the idea is that if the preachers are always holier than thou, if they are condescending, if they are hell and brimstone preaching, I don't want to have anything to do with them. So then please save me from such people. So my understanding is most people who are atheistic, not all, most people who are atheistic, they are because they have had some experience of religion which is negative, of religious people who are negative. But so when somebody says I'm a Hindu atheist, then I would ask them, okay, what is your idea of what is the God you are reacting against or rejecting? And then address that conception of God. Then ask them, what is your conception of being a Hindu? When you say you're a Hindu, what do you mean by that? And then we will find that in the broad Krishna does talk about atheism in the 16th chapter in a negative way, but he's not just talking about atheism at a psychological level. He says that atheism, which is also equated with that life is meaningless, that there is no overall purpose to life, that sensual pleasure is everything in life. Well, not all atheists are also like that. So I would say if you
Right.
examine the atheism and Hinduism, what you mean by those, then we can find some way of that even such a person has place within the broad Vedic, you could say, universe or
Umbrella.
Vedic
Right.
umbrella. Yeah, Vedic umbrella.
Right. Beautiful, beautiful answer. Because I have actually met certain atheists who are more compassionate, who are more accepting and intellectual, and have more sadhana, more spiritual practices in their life, even though they are atheists. So actually, we need to really, like, the question that you're asking is so relevant. What is your concept of God? What do you know of God that you're rejecting? And what do we know of God that we are accepting? We don't want to be blind bhaktas either. If we have not picked up the scriptures, whether you're Shaivite or Shakti Bhakta or whatever, uh, Devi Bhakta, have we picked up the scriptures that will tell us what is this thing we're worshipping? If we don't know, then we're just we're two extremes of the same, two sides of the same coin. And we can cause
Exactly.
destruction in the same
And
way.
again,
We can
going
cause.
back to the earlier, sorry, just to address one point, your earlier point about I talked about non-believers and wrongdoers. So
Yes.
within the context of other religions, it's very difficult for them to accommodate. How can there be a good atheist? Atheist is a person who has rejected God; they're condemned. But if you consider in the Vedic, in the Gita, there's two divisions: the division by the modes and division by one's devotional inclination. So our understanding is that somebody might be atheistic in terms of their spiritual temperament, but they may still have some mode of goodness within them. Maybe it is because of their upbringing, maybe because of their actions in their previous life. So we can fully appreciate the point that atheists can be sometimes good people, and sometimes religious people can be terrible people also. So there's a significant level of self-criticality
That's
in the
essential.
Bhagavatam. There is that it says that bhakti can also be practiced by people in goodness, in passion, and in ignorance. So even bhakti can be practiced in ignorance. So that
Yes.
self-criticality is there. So it's the point I'm making is it's not as black and white as some people think. You're atheist, you're out of this Vedic umbrella. I'm a theist, I'm inside the Vedic umbrella. No, there are many shades of gray in between. And sometimes in terms of behavior, an atheist might be better behaved than a theist who is in the lower modes. So the complexity of humanity is actually reflected in the Gita's analysis based on the three modes. There's a lot of shades of gray.
Very, really, really, yeah, so important. This person has been commenting again and again the same comment. So, and I thought, who better to answer this question than you, because
Yes, please.
you. But Sri Krishna's avatar of Bhagwan Vishnu. Why does ISKCON keep banging on about? He's in different comments. He's saying that why does ISKCON say Krishna is the source when clearly it's stated in some Puranas that he's the eighth avatar? Isn't Vishnu the source? Why
Okay.
why do we focus on Krishna?
Yeah. So now, here there's a very important principle to understand that how things are perceived. That is important. See, Vishnu is generally considered to be the one in charge of administration. So, what does it mean, administration in this case? That there are three devatas: there's Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh. So, the idea is that Brahma is in charge of creation, Vishnu is in charge of maintenance, and Lord Shiva is in charge of destruction. So, it's not that means Lord Shiva is a bad person who is destroying. It's that each of these are universal functions, and they need to be done. So, how are they done? They are done in a particular way by particular deities. So Lord Vishnu is the maintainer. So I'm sharing a PowerPoint slide about this to explain this answer. So what happens is
I
that
thought I would just.
whenever Yeah, sorry. So whenever there is any problem in the world, whenever there's any problem in the world, at that time, from here, people go to the administrator. So it's like if there is any law and order issue, we will go to the police person, or we'll go to the mayor, or we'll go to the chief minister, the prime minister, the head of state, the administrative head of state. So like that, whenever there are any problems in the universe, the various important people in the universe, they approach Vishnu. And then in response to that prayer to Vishnu, various avatars come. So it could be Ram, it could be Krishna, it could be Buddha, it could be Kalki. There are Dasha avatars, and there are many more avatars, not the Dasha. Now, having said this, what the Bhagavatam states is that God has multiple aspects. So there is God in office and there is God at home. And normally you could say the prime minister is in office is maybe a little more formal, the prime minister at home is a little more informal, but they are the same person. But so similarly, there is God at home and God in office. But the difference is that God, because he is God, he can be at two places, many places at the same time. So he's simultaneously in office and he's simultaneously in home. And the Bhagavatam explains that God in home is Krishna. That God in home is Krishna. So it's the same person. Krishna and Vishnu are the same person. Krishna is God in home, Vishnu is God in office. So what happens is, because Vishnu is God in office, whenever any cosmic emergency is there, the request always goes to Vishnu. And whichever divine being comes, that beings come through Vishnu. So even when Krishna appears, the prayer goes to Vishnu. And then Krishna appears. But that doesn't mean Vishnu is the source of Krishna. What it means is that Vishnu and Krishna both are co-eternal. However, if we take from the previous slide's perspective, all the avatars are coming through Vishnu, which is true, which is not wrong. But if you consider from this perspective, what happens is that Vishnu and Krishna are the same person. But what in terms of rasa, what in a God at home, so like a prime minister at home, will exhibit one's personality, the intimate side of one's personality, much more. So similarly, Krishna at home emphasizes or reveals his personal side much more. The multiplicity of his relationships. The rasa is much more. Vishnu doesn't have a father or a mother or a sibling. Krishna has all of those. So Krishna relishes many more relationships than Vishnu does. So in that sense, you could say Krishna is manifesting the personality of divinity more fully than Vishnu. So in that sense, it can be said that Krishna is the source of Vishnu. But having said that, this is not a major issue. So again, I mentioned earlier about the Bhed and Abhed. So if you have a pendulum over here, so one extreme could be that Vishnu and Krishna are entirely the same person in every way. Well, not exactly. This is focusing too much on the Abhed aspect, the other extreme. So this is too much on the Abhed. They're not different entirely. And the other is that Vishnu and Krishna are completely different. And if we consider them completely different, then we may fight. So some ISKCON devotees may say that Krishna is superior to Vishnu. And some other Vaishnava tradition, they may say Vishnu is superior to Krishna. But if we understand that these two are both extremes, Vishnu and Krishna are one person with different personalities.
Exactly.
And both are the supreme person, and worshipping both of them can take us to the supreme. And can take us supreme abode, that is like supreme perfection. So this is actually, I would say, an excellent example of theological differences being made too big so that we have dissension and dispute over issues that are practically not very consequential for us. This is, if you worship, like if you are attracted to Krishna and worship Vishnu, that's wonderful. If you are attracted to Krishna and worship Krishna, that's wonderful. So there's no need to make it a big issue either this way or that way.
Wonderful. That's such a beautiful analogy, especially for me, because I absolutely love the Vishnu Sahasranam. I listen to it every morning. When you go to Balaji, you can feel the profound, the spiritual energy. There's no question that this is not the Supreme Lord. And I really appreciate what you said. Different personalities and different expression of rasa. So some of his devotees enjoy this rasa of him as a young child or a young person, and some of them enjoy the rasa of this Aishwarya Bhav. So it is a matter of your own individuality and what you connect with, which is so beautiful that God allows that. He allows this
Oh, God welcomes
individuality.
that. God relishes that. Not just allows,
Yes.
welcomes and relishes that.
So I hope that answered your question, Aditya ji, because it is almost a mute point to discuss who is greater, Krishna or Vishnu. And if the only he was saying that he went to ISKCON temple and they said Krishna is God, then he left. That's one of them. So it doesn't really. If that is the reason why you're not entering a place of worship for Krishna or Vishnu, then maybe we need to reassess our understanding. And I really appreciate that what you've just shared, that they're actually the same exact person. And the more we try to separate them, it's almost like that's our own problem. Wonderful.
Rather than focusing on who is greater, it is better to focus on towards whom is my attraction greater. The point is not to talk who is greater. The point is to become attracted. That is what is going to transform us. The purpose of the Bhagavad-Gita is not simply to proclaim God's position. Ultimately, it is to transform our disposition, our heart. So, whether we are attracted to Vishnu or Krishna, if we are attracted, that's wonderful.
Wonderful. I'm just going to take one last question, and I can't find it right now. But somebody was saying that the only way forward now, coming back to this point about protecting Dharma, how to build on our Kshatriya nature and the need of the hour as such, how to balance out our anger and reaction with, you were talking about Brahminical qualities. Somebody was saying we must all the sannyasis should pick up weapons now. That's the only way forward. I can't find it now, but because there's so many comments. But is that an advisable way? Should Brahmanas pick up weapons? Do you think that we should? Who is qualified to pick up a weapon? I don't think we finished that thought when we were talking about Kshatriyas.
Yeah, okay. So who is qualified to pick up a weapon? That's a very serious question. My understanding is that one who has a healthy fear of the power of weapons. One who has a healthy fear, that has to be there. Generally, if a person is a trained say user of a rifle or a gun, if they're really trained to use it, they will themselves keep it if they have it in their home also, they will keep it very carefully, not let their children have access to it. Why? Because it has enormous destructive power. So not only we recognize the destructive power, but we recognize that we ourselves can also misuse it. So there's a healthy respect, and even you could say not fear in the sense of paranoia, but fear in the sense of fear that brings caution. It's like if I'm crossing a road, I need to have a healthy fear of the traffic coming. That doesn't mean I never cross the road. It just means I am cautious. So that first would be a healthy fear of the power of weapons. That is required. If we don't have that, we see this in the Bhagavatam. Ashwathama uses a Brahmastra without knowing how to control it. And that Brahmastra is about to destroy the whole world. So in today's world, we are also very, very apprehensive that, say, nuclear weapons or other weapons of mass destruction may fall in the hands of some rogue states or some rogue actors, and they can cause untold devastation. So just as that is a valid fear, so similarly for us also, the first thing is that we need to be careful that we don't if anger is the cause for raising weapons, I think that is a very dangerous thing, because that anger often makes us indiscriminate. So yes, anger can be there, but there is also the capacity to restrain the anger so that we are actually using the weapon constructively, not just destructively, not just indiscriminately, rather discerningly, not indiscriminately. So a healthy
Mm.
fear of the power of weapons, a healthy capacity to control one's own anger, that has to be there.
Mm.
And then beyond that, of course, we can say that, so these are all actually Kshatriya values. Kshatriya values are that Kshatriya is not supposed to use weapons indiscriminately. And if they use it indiscriminately, that actually is considered to be a deficiency in a Kshatriya. So some of us may
Right.
have inclinations. If we have inclinations in that direction, we can learn some self-defense, we can use some weapons, but to get
Mm.
careful training. And that's not just training in using the weapons, but training in learning to restrain ourselves, to regulate ourselves so that we use it properly. That's why if
Right.
you see, Duryodhan was a Brahmana, sorry, Duryodhan was a Kshatriya, Arjuna was a Kshatriya. But the difference is that Duryodhan never listened to good advice. And that's why his Kshatriya nature got distorted and he caused an unnecessary devastating war.
Mm.
Now Arjuna, he was a Kshatriya, he was also heroic, but he would listen to good advice. Just before the war, he turned to Krishna for advice. So I would say that capacity is a third point. The Kshatriyas have to be guided by good advice. That means
Mm.
Brahminical people need to have the guided, not necessarily micro control by them. The Krishna didn't micro control Arjuna about how he's going to fight the war, but
Right.
he was overall guided in his purposes, his values and purposes. So
Wonderful.
yes, if somebody feels inspired, I don't think we can have by any genealogical decision that who can be a Kshatriya or not. Today the Varanas are
Mm.
very nuanced, so you just have to look at one's individual nature. So it's a bigger question is that how do we discern our nature? Do I have the nature to be a Kshatriya? My understanding is two things. There is inner outer competence and inner comfort or confidence. That
Mm.
how do I know if I'm intellectual?
Mm.
I'm good at studying, I'm good at presenting, I'm good at analyzing, and it can be objectively assessed. But internally, I feel happy
Mm.
doing it. This is what I love to do. This is what I look forward to do.
Mm.
So now, Kshatriya, I would
Yes.
say, what we need in today's world is, yes, we definitely need people who will use weapons, but Kshatriya
Mm.
is a holistic thing. If
Yes.
some people today can take up more responsible advocacy of Hindu causes, that is also Kshatriya work. That is very much required,
Mhm.
and that can help far more than, because we live in a world which is still significantly civilized. How often are we going to require the use of weapons? Some
Mm.
places, sometimes definitely, but overall advocacy, overall uh, doing things in a strategic way by which we can help create a positive contribution of dharma and a positive perception of dharma. So the other qualities of Kshatriya,
Mm.
they're also important, and there are many
Okay.
facilities to do that in today's world. Yeah.
I think we should have a podcast, Prabhu, if you would oblige one day about Varnashram and understanding our inner psychology. That would be really, I would really enjoy that if that would be possible. I'm going to
Yes,
ask
that
just
would
one
be really
last
wonderful.
question because she's been
Yes, last
literally
one.
asking like a million
Yeah.
times. It's not related at all to this talk today, but I'm gonna, if that's okay. It's about addiction, and I think I have no idea about K-pop, anime, and stuff, but my children do play video games, and I can already see the the pull, this intense pull towards just completely losing our consciousness into this world. So Snehaji, she's been asking for a long time. I Prabhu is the perfect person to answer this question about addiction. How shall we tackle addiction in the youth?
How to tackle addiction in the youth? That's tough. My understanding would be broadly uh, three things. First is that, if you consider any addictive desire, it's not always like a very intense desire. It's
Hmm.
There are urges which we have. So, and those urges sometimes become very strong. So I use the word that the urges have surges. Urges, they just go
Hmm.
up. So sometimes when they go up, at that time it is almost impossible to resist them. At that time, don't define yourself by what happens when the surges come. Focus on what you do between those surges, because sometimes it may just be too strong. The surges may be so strong that it's almost impossible to resist it. So, okay, at that time I'm overcome. But what do I do after that? If in the in between time I'm just beating myself up, why did I do that? Why did I waste so much time? Why did I indulge in this? Well, that could be very dangerous. That means we are simply weakening ourselves, and next time the surge will come, it's going to be even worse. It's not necessarily worse. At least we will not be equipped in any way to deal with it. So, in some cases, some urges may have just become so strong due to past indulgence that at that time, resisting may be impossible. And if somebody we know, or even we ourselves, are suffering from that, don't see them as bad people or depraved people. See them as almost like having a disease. I like to share a image over here to illustrate this point. That see how addiction grows, any addictive desire goes. This is based on Bhagavad-Gita 260-263. See, every desire that we indulge in, it's initially like a small, it's not even a snowball, it's a snow pebble. We could just kick it and crack it and it will break apart. But as we indulge in it, it starts becoming bigger and bigger. It starts becoming a snowball. And then it becomes a snow boulder. And when it has become a snow boulder, at that time it knocks the person over. So now for some of us, certain cravings might be at that level of the cravings might be at this level, at indulgence. So recognize that they won't stay at that level. I can control this. I can control this. Some people say drink but don't get drunk. Well, it's possible, but it's not always possible also. You start doing it and tomorrow it may just go over. It can happen with many things. So if you understand this, you could say the analysis of how it grows. So that same thing which you say I can control it, maybe you can control it today. But after some time it will become this big a snow boulder, it will be impossible to control. So if we are at this level, just best is to stop it. Don't think I'll be able to control it. Just try to regulate yourself. But if you have come to this level in some things, then don't be too hard on yourself if during the surges we can't control ourselves. Then at that time, focus all the energy between the surges. Rather than beating yourself up at that time, beating yourself up, why did I do that at that time? Focus on what can I do constructive during the intermediate time. And what can we do constructive in the intermediate time? I would say the most important thing in that case is that another example I like to give is like a waves. When waves come, they sweep us away. And if a huge wave has come, no matter how strong I may be, I cannot actually stop the wave or stop the wave from sweeping me away. But what we can do is we can find an anchor. So an anchor is something which is good for us and which we feel good doing. That is our anchor. So for example, somebody likes to indulge, just surf a lot on social media, watch this, do this, watch this video, read this. Well, what do you like to do? Well, maybe I like music. Okay. And is there some kind of music which is also good for me? So if we can find that something which is both good for us and something which we feel good doing, then that can become our anchor. So this is our anchor. In the Bhakti tradition, it is called Uddipan. Things we like to do and things that are good for us. Where is the intersection between the two? Where is the intersection between the two? So learn to find that and learn to hold on to that. So if the urge to surf the net comes for me, the urge to gossip comes in me, I will not gossip, I will not do this. Well, saying that sometimes is like the wave is coming and I'll not get swept away. Well, don't say just don't get swept away. Find out an anchor. Okay, I like to hear spiritual music. Or, I like to recite shlokas. I like to hear some good wisdom. I like to read some wisdom quotes. So have that anchor ready. Have that anchor ready. So when we have that anchor ready, then and we learn to, so in between the urges come, in between the urges, we find the anchor and learn to hold on to the anchor. And as our grip on our anchor will become stronger, then what will happen in future, even when the urges come, they will not sweep us away because we have learned to hold on to the anchor.
Right.
And the last thing
That's
is
the whole point of a sadhana.
sadhana. Yes, exactly. We do our japa, we hear kirtan, we do bhakti. That there can be many anchors, but bhakti and connection with the divine provides us the strongest anchors. So that's the second part. First is just be kind to yourself and focus, and then focus on the space between the surges. Second is strengthen the anchor, and third is try to have external supports for yourself, because sometimes it's not just a matter of our own will. Sometimes, depending too much on our own will is not easy. So what Krishna essentially says in 258 in the Bhagavad-Gita is that the best way to deal with temptation, or not the best, a highly effective way to deal with temptation is to not deal with temptation. That means keep tempting things away and try to keep good constructive things around you. So if we can have external support, that is a very big help. And external support can be best in terms of we have healthy relationships. If we have somebody who can be like accountability partner for us, who won't judge and condemn us, but still who can share. I did like this, and I really don't want to do this. Then if we get the urge, we can talk with them and they can help us. So quite often we surround ourselves with not external supports, but external temptations or external threats, external weakeners. And then we try to avoid the restrain ourselves. That's almost impossible. So those three things, a kind focus on what we can do, finding and holding on to our anchors, and creating a supportive environment around us, rather than a weakening or a tempting environment. Those are ways in which we can deal with addiction. Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you. That's a very holistic approach. As always, all your answers have been so profound. I cannot thank you enough, Prabhu. I've taken up 2 hours and 12 minutes of your time. And I wanted to thank everybody listening. There's still so many of them online. There's hundreds of comments that have come through. I apologize we can't answer all your questions today. But if Krishna is kind, Prabhu will come back and answer your questions next time. You can also follow Chaitanya Charan Prabhu. He does regular podcasts, a monk's podcast on YouTube, a spiritual scientist website, and the Gita Daily website. If you look him up, there's so much wisdom there. And he's pretty much answered every question you can think of, connecting it back to the Gita in a kind of, even if you don't believe in Krishna, even if you're an atheist, I can promise you, you will find something very valuable in what Prabhu offers in his daily Gita meditations. And one last thing I will say, for anyone who's local from Leicester, we're offering a Kirtan seminar this weekend, teaching basic kartal skills, mridanga skills starting next week. Then there's a spiritual psychology. You can come into the temple and take one-on-one, not one-on-one, as in-person lectures with the resident monks there. So you can look up College of Vedic Studies for anyone in the Midlands and local. Just wanted to put that through. Thank you so much, Prabhu. Please come again soon.
Thank you. We're happy to. Thank you for
Krishna.
your wonderful service. And thank you for the opportunity. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.